Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. We are looking at a couple comic books, which I suppose everybody here is intelligent enough to figure out without me telling them. Specifically, we're looking at Adventure Comics number 418 and Adventure Comics number 419. Now, at the time, these were both headlined by Supergirl. As you can see here, that's some Bob Oksner cover. Amazing artist, just an absolutely amazing artist. So lots of stories in these, multiple stories in these, but one story in particular, with a part one and a part two, involves a Denny O'Neil story drawn by Alex Toth about Black Canary. And that's what I wanted to show. Let's slide this dude out of the way. Let's make this one front and center. And the reason I wanted to show this one off, and a lot of people know this story, it's somewhat famous, it's just Toth's ability to tell a story with sequential art. And I mean, of course, the art is absolutely beautiful. So let's jump in to this one and take a look at it. All right, so here we go. We'll flip through a little bit on the way. Supergirl looks like she's having some kind of a adventure, maybe in China, international. You can fly everywhere you want to. I believe we got, that's part of that story, I think. Yeah, it's still Supergirl. We got the Phantom Stranger in this one. Awesome stuff. We got our hit records for 286. That was basically Columbia House for that time. And if anybody younger is looking at or hearing this, they're going, what the heck is Columbia House, old man? Columbia House was a fantastic way to run out of money, is what Columbia House was. So here it is, Black Canary, presenting an all-new adventure of the loveliest lady crime fighter of them all. The Black Canary, muscles tensed, she faces her masked foes and her own sudden, violent death. In these few seconds, she recalls how she came to this den of danger. Now, I'm talking a lot about Alex Toth's ability to tell a story. Denny O'Neil knew how to tell a story as well. So what we have on this one is sort of a frame. We're starting in the middle of the action. We got these dudes with the fright masks on. We have these women back here. They look like they're dressed for judo, karate, something like that. And then we got, front and center, Black Canary. Look at the way the light divides this thing, which matches how that's divided. So it kind of pulls the whole thing together. Really impressive stuff. The story starts with Dinah Drake. Remember, she actually has black hair. That's a wig that she uses as part of her disguise. She's, looking at her picture there of Ollie, of the Green Arrow. He's off again, off chasing an injustice or a dream. Why did I ever fall in love with Green Arrow? My restless Robin Hood. But she decides, no time for moping. She needs to find a job. She is a widow. She needs a job. But she goes, problem is, her main talent is what? Judo? Not a lot of jobs for a lady teaching judo. But she finds one in the newspaper. Okay. Look at the progression there. See her kind of moped over. Here she is, the copy of the paper. And then that. Look at that great work there. Now, Toth liked to use really bold lines. But when he needed to get detailed, he certainly could. So here's this opportunity, and she decides she's going to be much more impressive in getting the job if she goes as the Black Canary. So we have her getting dressed. It's not done in a salacious way. But again, the progression, here it's far off, kind of middle ground, close in. Here it's far off, closer in, and then far off again. It's just, but varied. He's varying this thing. Well, she goes down there on her motorcycle. Again, dude, Black Canary is one of the coolest characters in DC Comics. Created back in the 40s by Kanigher and Carmine Infantino, who designed her. Also one of the greatest greatest costumes in comics. Very minimalist, very simple, but very effective. It works really, really well. You don't need complexity in these kind of things. Sometimes minimalism is harder. Cutting things out makes it a little harder. But she shows up at the Women's Resistance League, comes in asking about the job. This lady thinks she looks a little bit familiar. Do you know me? Or do I know you? You know me. Do I know you? Oh, yes, you're the Black Canary. Right. Tell me, can you live up to your reputation, honey? I mean, if you mean, do I know judo? Well, the answer is yes. Well, let's see. Timothy, test her. And we see Timothy creeping up from behind Then we get this amazing page here of him grabbing her. Ha, ha, ha. Gotcha, little old birdie. And then, boom, she brings her heels down on the tops of his feet, hits him in the neck with a chop, takes out his knee. As he makes a swing, she ducks down, grabs his leg, pulls him down. Very fluid, but also notice he gets rid of the panel frames at this point, because I think that adds to the fluidity and it gives him more room to draw what he wants to do. Because if you divide this up, if you got 3 frames up here, well, how are you going to do that? Maybe it's just 2 frames. But if it's 2 frames, look at the action he has going on. So he gets basically 4 frames in without having to draw any of that. And then boom and boom. Want to try again? No need. The job is yours. But just again, look at that. And then look also at the angles he'll choose, in a lot of this stuff. Different angles. But here, kind of keeps the same angle because he wants to show the particular action and how she takes this guy apart piece by piece. So she begins training these women. She wants to start with telling them about judo, and its history, etc. She's like, no, let's forgo all that. Let's get to the practical moves. She wants to teach these women, the Women's Resistance League, to fight. Well, why? She wants women to be equal to men physically in order to, just be able to take care of themselves, to not be, pushed around by larger men. Okay. And Black Canary's okay with that. But once again, look at this. We got the silhouette from afar. Back. Just, if you're an artist, look at stuff like this. And they did it so well. The guys who came up through the 40s, 50s, they drew a lot of different kinds of books, a lot of different kinds of stories that they could draw on when they were doing superhero stuff. One of the things you'll notice with a lot of these guys, the older dudes, is they're really good at drawing people and giving them personality who are not superheroes, right? And you also notice with Toth, are these people, do they look, like maybe a little cartoony, but not exactly cartoony? I mean, she's, that's an interesting face. He's not afraid to do that to bring the personality out of these characters. So she gives them a whole lot of training, time to take a break, get some dinner, basically. And again, just look at the angles he's using, right? Bertha wasn't kidding. These guys are rugged. They learn quickly, as if violence was native to them. Well, who or what they are isn't my concern. My job is, maybe I can find a quiet spot in the cellar for some rest and reading. But now look again. Look, you got the depth of that cellar. You don't really need all that. But it works because that's the panel size you have. Depth of the cellar. Here's the stairs. You don't even see her face going down the stairs, right? Just interesting, bold choices. See her from behind here. Because voices from behind that door. You cover the front. We won't hesitate to shoot. They're holding my class at gunpoint. So these ladies are in trouble. Here's the gunman. And this brings us back to where we were. Her held by these gunmen as she comes in. They kind of push her in. She objects physically. Whack. And here we got her taking people out again. Now this time he does use panels. You don't need to do the same trick over and over and over again. And so she takes these gunmen out and says, well, consider this a practical demonstration of how judo really does work. Bertha, call the police. I'll stand guard. No, you won't. Whoa, what happened? She hits her with a blackjack. So good. And look at this close-up of her face. And Infantino was really good at this kind of stuff, too. He's another one you should study. Panel placement, but also kind of like a filmmaker would. How do you set these different scenes? How do you do this stuff? Practical learning can be gained from some of these older comic books. So don't pass them up. You go find some of this stuff out in a dollar bin somewhere, pick it up, take it home, study it, or go online and find, scans of old pages and stuff, and you'll learn a lot of stuff. So she's been taken out, and then we get our cliffhanger here. Well, what are you waiting for? Finish her off. Gunpoint. But we also notice what? That's a woman's hair. Yeah, they weren't really gunmen. They were women disguised. So what is going on here? What has the Black Canary gotten herself into? Oh, I love that. Look at that. Just the half of the face with the hair. He does so good with that hair. He doesn't overdo it. And again, it's minimalist sort of art. he likes to use shadow, solid shadow, far more than the, you know, the kind of cross hatching. That's not cross hatching, I guess, or cross hatching. So he keeps it bold, but then look with the hair. He's not trying to draw every strand of hair, but he gives that full, rich flow of hair with really just a few lines. It's just about knowing where to put all the lines in these things. So let's go to the next issue, where we're going to get the second part of this little crime story. And you might be saying, well, why isn't she using the Canary Scream? I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure she had it yet. That's something that came later for the character. Well, I presume she didn't have it yet. So now we're in May 1972. At least that's the cover date. It would have been from 2 or 3 months from before that. Another great cover with Supergirl on it, one of her many different costumes. One of the great things with Supergirl was they like to change that costume around. You know, why do you do that? Well, because one of the ideas of Supergirl is to attract, more girls to reading the comic book. And so they're trying to do that sort of, let's play with outfits, let's play with fashion and all that kind of thing. They do the same thing in Katie Keene. They do the same thing in Archie, with Betty and Veronica. They'd always have like a page where the two of them were trying on different outfits or showing off different outfits. Basically trying to do that to an extent with Supergirl. All right, second part of this story. A moment ago, the cellar gym of the Women's Resistance League, which had hired the Black Canary to teach its members judo, and where she had just come upon an armed band of disguised women threatening her student class. Whereupon, she counterattacked, only to be treacherously cut down from behind by her employer, Bertha, the League's president. Now look, if you didn't get this issue right here, you can actually see what comic book I was just talking about in the video before this. I didn't realize I grabbed it. But if you didn't get this issue, you missed the first part of the story. And so they sum it up for you right here. It's how these old books, a lot of people think it's intimidating to get into these books because you're like, issue 418, how can I follow a story for 418? You don't. These are episodic stories, sometimes 2 or 3 parters. You could pick these comic books up anywhere along the run, and within a couple, 3 issues, you're basically on board with what's going on. Have you seen older storylines? No, but if they're important, they'll make little editor's notes to them. These were books to be picked up by anyone, anytime, to be read. Now look at this panel. This is incredible. And again, it's about how do I put a lot of information into a relatively small space? So at the center of it is, of course, Black Canary. And you see, despite the sort of kind of look like photographs, that paneling, she's got a complete form there, right? It's not like broken up, really. It's just the white lines blocking a little bit. But then what we have up here are these 3 faces. Bertha, the woman who's maybe going to shoot Black Canary, etc. And then we have over here, the firearm, the hand holding the firearm. Now, if you tried to draw that just as a piece, you're going to have the Black Canary much smaller because you got to have room for the people and you got to have room for their faces if you're going to show these 3, right? And you got to stage them in that way. You can do this. This can be done. In fact, if we look in the previous issue, on the last page of this one, you get, something similar. We see the woman from behind pointing the gun at her, right? And here we get another panel where we see the people's faces. But how do we combine those 2 panels and do it in a way where we're going to get nice, bold images that we can work with? Well, this is how he did it, making it look like, a scatter of photographs on the floor. Really fantastic stuff. Okay. Well, what's going down is these ladies have a plot. They got a caper. They decide they're going to take her with them, so they have a hostage in case things don't go well. So they tie her up tight, put her in the back of this truck. There she is, bound and not gagged, but bound. And they start driving out to the boondocks. Why are they going to the boondocks? Well, what does that mean? It just means out in the middle of nowhere. They have to intercept a vehicle out there. And they figure if they need to get rid of her, well, they'll get rid of her out in the country. So we get her coming to a few hours later. So they're driving way out. And she starts hearing what they're saying. after we free our leader. You can see how it's written, right? The text makes it seem like Canary is, she's kind of coming out of unconsciousness and barely hearing the voices. We'll plug the Canary, figures, and leave her there on the spot. The police will think she was the brain behind the break. Ha ha ha. Got to get out of these ropes. So we're going to have her tied up for a lot of this. So you're going to get a lot of interesting angles. Here's one. Boots, there's her body, there's her head. He's got to come up with interesting ways to show her in this position for a lot of different panels. We see her, that's Canary actually talking to her. Bertha, I'm awake and curious. I heard you say I'm going to be shot. Mind telling me where? Not at all, BC. Overconfident villains. But here we go. Here we're getting different angles of her. And we're getting a lot of conversation. And you got to make the panels visually interesting if you don't have action happening in them. It's just talking. Got to make them visually interesting. And that's what he's doing. I mean, look at this. Look at this frame. Now, again, this is how, if you're a filmmaker, this is how you're trying to stage your shots. But as a comic artist, you can get angles that would be very, very difficult to do, with actual film, with actual people. So so they're gloating. They got her. She goes, I'd be hopeless were it not for my rebel Robin Hood, the Green Arrow, lecturing me. Beautiful bird lady, if you must ever give up, do it 10 minutes after you've drawn your last breath and not a second before. By the way, just really nicely done there. Look at him. He's got that dashing kind of thing going. Very good. And basically, he has this never say die attitude. And she's like, he's right. Where there's life, there's hope. So what's she going to do? She starts trying to cut her ropes. She finds a sharp spot, and that happened on the page 4. Finds a sharp spot on the side of the van and starts working on the ropes. That's why she's keeping people talking. Well, they get to their destination. They block the road with the van. We have her getting out. You go here, you go there, all that kind of stuff, getting them ready. And, all right, Marcy, well, goodbye, Canary. It's been a pleasure employing you. Must stall for time. And again, we get another really great angle here. Fantastic stuff. Look, you don't just have ever like two people just sort of standing apart from one another talking in one of these things. So think about that if you're an artist, how to set that stuff up. Be very creative. And of course, to do that, you have to really be a master of your craft. You have to be able to draw people from all sorts of different angles. Now, are some of these things perfectly anatomically correct? Hard to say. The way they're drawn, maybe they're not perfect, but they get the message across. You're telling a story. There's a lot of emotion in that. Get the story across with this dramatic stuff. So she keeps her talking long enough to get the ropes to break, and she strikes. Must be quick. Take a nap, Marcy. There. So she cracks her right across the jaw. So she's now out. At that moment, Hill, look out. Hill, get that truck off the road. Yes, sir. And they let go their concussion grenades and take poor Hill out. Look at that. Now look at the colors. Not remotely realistic. We got him in silhouette, but not a black silhouette. We used a different color. But look at the three colors you have going there, right? The way they complement each other. I mean, yellow, red, blue, basically. But that's interesting, and it's bold. They don't clash with one another. They don't blend with one another, right? And then the giant sound effect. And then you see the explosion, the speed lines. I don't know if they're called speed lines for an explosion, but maybe. So she says, well, what am I going to do? She gets behind the wheel of the van, okay, and drives it down this hill, chasing off some of these women. And then she sees them back at the car, the police car, and she rushes in. And look at this, jumps over the vehicle, and look at the angle of her putting boot into face. Fantastic. So much for Bertha and company. Beautifully done, miss. That's the police officer talking. I've radioed the local police to help round up the rest of the mob. You might like to meet the woman they tried to set free. The Catwoman. Well, the Batman's old foe is Bertha's leader. Go choke on some birdseed, Canary. Anything I can do for you, miss? Do you know of any jobs for a judo expert? There you go. Wind it up with a joke. Let's get a nice shot there of Catwoman, I guess they let her wear her costume, you know, being transferred from one prison to another. That's it's just part of the game, you know, for supervillains. You give them a little something. But there we have it, folks. The two issues, Alex Toth, Denny O'Neil. It is, like I said, it's not a long story. It's a crime story. You don't really get superpowers in it at all. So if you're thinking, how do I tell a story without superpowers? How do I tell a story without massive amounts of gunfire? Here's how you do it, right? You get some good action fight scenes, but look how many scenes in here are sort of just like domestic or people talking. You make the panels visually interesting, you know, and that works for people. They're maybe a little bit wordy. Some people think so. I'm not too worried about that. But you have something to dazzle the eyes as you're going through. And of course, you know, Black Canary is one of the most beautiful, you know, comic book super heroines there is. And Alex Toth knows how to draw beautiful women and get the most out of them. You know, a lot of curves, and you notice you got the fishnets, so that helps increase the illusion of the curves on the character. But I mean, also look at the faces and look at the emotions that he puts into the faces. Very important stuff. So great stuff to study if you're an up-and-coming comic book artist, or, I mean, even if you're a pro comic book artist. I know the pros love to look at other pros and what they do, and I think Toth is one of the best. Little bit cartoony, but not so much as to, you know, make the whole thing seem like a Looney Tunes episode. Just dazzling stuff. And that's why I bought these two issues. I'd been thinking about it for some time, you know, that I'd love to own them. Then I went ahead and looked and found that, yeah, you know, these are not like pristine copies, but like about $5 each. So how can I lose, right? And plus, I get to read the rest of the stories in these comics as well. So that's it, folks, for Black Canary, a very cool story from Denny O'Neil, art by Alex Toth. Amazing stuff. Some stuff you can study. And look, if you just love amazing art, if you love a good story, there you have it. I wish there were more books that did the sort of adventure comics concept. 4 different stories, different creative teams behind them. Gives you a chance to play with different characters. Gives artists, writers a chance to do maybe a small story on a book, you know, for the character they don't work with, or a character that doesn't have a book right now, but it builds that character a little bit. And so it gives, and you know, it's also a good chance to try out, you know, new artists, new writers, give them a short story, you know, a few pages, see what they can do with it. It's a great concept. Maybe it worked better back in the day when we bought these things, you know, at grocery stores and convenience stores, as well as comic shops. There was a bigger audience for them, but little anthology books, I wish they'd make a more of a comeback. There's some out there, but I wish they'd make a bigger comeback, especially with the bigger houses. I think it's a good way to, you know, again, introduce characters to people and get them interested. Let me know in the comments what you think of this amazing story, the art, the words, etc. I'd love to hear from you what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. That would be very, very cool. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Read a little Black Canary. Or heck, you know, if you just want to see some Alex Toth art sort of in action, go watch some old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. He did a lot of the design on those things. A lot of it. And to be honest, his model sheets look better than the cartoons do. So maybe just go and Google Alex Toth model sheet, and you will see some amazing, amazing stuff. That'll do it, though, for now. Have fun, everybody. I will see you next time soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.